This week on Garden Time, we're going to extremes. The weather is changing and your garden is feeling it. What can you do about the climate and how it affects your plants? Changes in the air and in your garden. We talk about it all next on Garden Time. Garden Time is brought to you by Capital Subaru in Salem, Oregon.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
Welcome to the Garden Time Podcast. We're based in the Pacific Northwest of the United States in a Zone 7 region. This deals with plants that can survive at approximately 0 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. I'm producer Jeff Gustin with your hosts Judy Alaruzo and Ryan Seeley. Welcome to Garden Time. We'd love to thank Capital Subaru, our friends in Salem, Oregon, for sponsoring us again. As a great supporter of the TV show for many years. I'm producer Jeff. Ryan Seeley, Judy Alaruzo are here. And today, we're going to go back a little bit. Okay, so last time we did the plant lists, and we were talking about peperomia. And a friend of ours, Rick Naylor, Mr. Jokester, said he really enjoyed the podcast. The question he said, he bought a peperomia, it did well, but he put it on his pizza and it tasted terrible. So,
That's right.
so he wanted an answer. Okay, so what was the answers that we came up with?
Did he slice it thin enough for the pizza so it got done?
Yeah. And was he cooking it outside?
Right. Was it baking on the outside barbecue, in his Traeger, or in his pizza oven?
Right.
Yeah, because it's an indoor plant, Rick. So, but yeah, so if you guys have questions about that, even joking ones, we would be happy to answer those. But peperomia is not edible. It is an indoor plant. And thank you, Rick, for the question. So this week we're going to be talking about extremes. And we're going to start with weather. So this spring, well, actually these last few years, here in the Pacific Northwest, we've had ice storms, smoke.
Extreme heat.
Extreme heat. We had the heat, what's called the heat dome, which was last year, and that was 116 here in June, right as plants were just getting established.
And we get atmospheric rivers.
Yes, which are just weeks and weeks of rain. We've had record rainfall this year. So let's talk about, first of all, for a lot of people on the East Coast and here in the Northwest, snow and ice. So when, as a gardener, when you're encountering this, what are you looking for to do for your plants? Can you do anything?
You know, it's Mother Nature is always a difficult one to kind of predict, but there's a lot of times what we'll know ahead of time that a storm may be coming in. You know, we'll get some extreme cold weathers, and it kind of, as far as our plants go, it will kind of depend on how we want to protect them. A lot of times if there's, if we're going to have a snow event followed by some cold, a lot of times that snow, a little blanket of snow, will actually kind of protect and insulate our plants. Where you might want to leave that on the plants so when that cold weather hits, it is a little bit more insulated.
Right, and then sometimes though that snow, it's too much, and then it starts breaking the plants. It just kind of stays there for so long, then it turns to ice, and then you get breakage. So that's dangerous too. So it's kind of, you have to know your plants or know the structure of your plants. And then I think too, sometimes there's nothing you could do. People go out there, they'll put like 2x4s under branches, and you try to save those branches as much as possible.
So are there trees that are more susceptible to breakage? Are there brittle trees?
There are some trees, say like a birch tree or an ash tree that, typically the faster they're growing the tree, the more brittle it might be. An oak is a lot slower growing, so it's going to be a little bit more stable and able to withhold some of the branching. But if you get into like an ash tree, or typical known for being kind of a fast growing, yet kind of a brittle wood. So you're going to get a heavy snow load on there. You may be getting a lot more damage.
Right, and conifers, they're made to shed snow just because their nature. They're usually a colder weather plant or tree. So I think that they're kind of made for that, and so you wouldn't have to worry so much about those.
So would pruning help? If you're going to be, it's summertime now, would you hire an arborist? reducing the number of limbs help, or does that create more problems?
Typically overall, you want to always kind of evaluate your trees in your yard. Being it for like winter time, if you're looking at them for disease and pest issues, winter protection, it's something you should be doing all the time, regardless of if it's a weather or not, just to make sure you have some structure. Because sometimes you might have had a branch that's been broken out of a tree, where it's going to open it up to maybe some insect diseases later, or it makes that tree off balance. So you have a lot of weight that'll be on one side of the tree, not on the other. You might want to have an arborist kind of come look to see if you're going to have a danger as far as if that tree going to fall over and have issues later if that ground gets super saturated and wet, or if you get a big snow event. So it's always a good idea to kind of evaluate your trees to make sure that they are a structure that is safe.
And we have in the past, we've had limbs taken down during the summertime that are dead. That's not any danger to our home, but it can come down and knock out a fence or whatever.
Sure.
So what about frost cloth and protecting shrubs? Judy, do you recommend that at all?
I think
From snow damage and ice damage?
Yeah, I think if you know that you have a plant that's maybe kind of temperamental, it's maybe that's on the edge of that hardiness, or you know that it has had problems in the past, I think that being preventative like that, it's not going to hurt. Or sometimes you get those early snows that it's like it's been so warm and then all of a sudden we get a snowstorm. I mean, that's happened in the late spring. It comes out of nowhere. And so, yeah, go protect those plants. So it's just like Ryan was saying, just watch the weather.
Yeah.
Just be cognizant of it and just be proactive.
Right. If you're typically going to have, live in a climate where you're going to have months on end of cold weather, it's going to be a lot harder to try to protect a plant that's not supposed to live through the winter there. Whereas, sometimes you can get away with, kind of some zonally challenged plants that might want to, cross over, like here in the Northwest, we can kind of get away with doing some bananas.
Right.
Right. So you can protect the trunk in the wintertime because we don't have long periods of cold. It may come for a few days where you can insulate the trunk and protect that. Otherwise, maybe it's just enjoy it for the year and then replant it.
Right, definitely.
So you were mentioned earlier about the layer of snow sometimes creating insulation for the plants. And I remember when we did the TV show, people were always asking about pruning and what to cut and everything else. And what did nature do before man came along with pruners? It pretty much pruned itself, or it just grew and then broke. And that layer of insulation on the buds, how late do you wait to see if there's real damage?
I think that's case by case.
Yeah, so
It depends on the
right.
plants.
Typically, if you have a late where that plant has already started to leaf out and bud in the spring, and you have a real late hard freeze or frost, you're definitely going to damage that bloom or that bud and reduce. So on like a fruit tree or a grape or something like that. I know this spring, or grapes, we had a late frost that did damage that bud that had just come out. But those grapes kind of rejuvenated and reflushed a new bud, so you'll get some of that. But sometimes if it's in full bud, there's not a lot you're going to do to be able to get an apple tree to get its more apples on it.
Right, there's a time frame for a lot of
Yes.
things. But there's other plants that it just is going to like push another bloom, or the foliage will be fine and you lose some of the blooms.
Yeah.
It just kind of, the plant's not going to be dead, but you just lost some of the flowers.
And I know that the standard rule is you take your fingernail and scratch on like the
wood.
on the wood to make sure. And if it's green underneath, that still shows that there's some healthy action going on.
There's a lot of times we can get, kind of a little antsy and want that plant to bounce back a lot quicker than it actually does. And we get, no, it's dead, just pull it out. But it may take several months sometimes for a plant to grow out of it where it's going to look dead until the weather really starts warming up. You get into a longer growing season, and then they'll start flushing out. So it kind of depends on your patience level. Too.
But maybe wait. A lot of times it's like we tell people to wait, don't do severe pruning, because they're pretty resilient. I think sometimes, like you said, we're not patient, and the plants are pretty resilient.
Yeah, and that even goes back to when you have some ice damages or damages from heat stress, where you're going to get some burned foliage and burned leaves. It's Mother Nature really does try to regenerate herself and make come back. And the more we kind of try to mess around with that, sometimes we screw things up a little bit.
Right.
But if we kind of let them start flushing, regrowing, flushing new growth, new buds, then we will start seeing where that damage is, and then we can clean it up.
Yeah.
But it was good to be patient.
Yeah.
There's never a too late of a time to prune back, is there?
No, like
I don't
a couple
think so,
years
yeah.
ago when we had our big heat dome here in the Northwest, we were up in 116, and a lot of conifers really got fried and burned. I still have damage on my conifers from that, but they're flushing out, and it's less and less every year. But because it's a big tree, I'm not going to go in and prune it all back. But as Mother Nature is rejuvenating, and that's been over a year.
Yeah, it's up to what you're going to expect or what you
Right.
want to look at.
Right.
Yeah, if you're not going to take your big Doug firs down or whatever.
Yeah, and we had a lot, I mean, we noticed it on the show, we have a lot of trees that got that southwest and west exposures. And they've had drought issues already, so when they're already stressed out, it's just going to get worse. So we're talking about extreme weather. The one thing that was very extreme a couple of years ago was the smoke. And for those people that don't know, that we had record wildfire fires here. We had smoke also from Northern California fires that came up into the Northwest. And it created days and days of little or no sunlight or filtered sunlight.
Yeah.
What happened to some of the plants there?
Well, for in our area, it was no sun for so many days.
It was dark.
Dark. It was really frightening, and it got so cool all of a sudden. I mean, it was like the end of June, and all of a sudden it was 20 degrees cooler during the day. And so the poor plants thought, oh, okay, the days are shorter, it's cooler, we're going to start going into fall mode. So even broadleafed evergreens started dropping leaves. Deciduous trees started
Right.
dropping leaves, and it was like, uh-oh. But, I think everything came back, though. We were patient. We told people to be patient, and they were most on and on, more so that they were okay the next year.
Okay.
So you just have to
And
be careful.
things that were flowering
Yes,
stopped flowering
stop
and dropped all
flowering.
of their flowers instantly, where you're like, oh geez, my plant is dying.
Mm-hmm.
But like you're saying, if you're that being the patient, I don't think anything really died from it, but it did set it back, reflush, hit the reset button, flush some new growth, set new foliage, and rebloomed.
Right.
Yeah, I know that the wine industry too. There was a lot of smoke taint on the grapes, and they were trying to figure out. OSU was involved in that, Oregon State University, and trying to figure out how to make use out of those grapes because you can't get rid of that smoke
Right.
Yeah.
flavor in there. So let's talk about. We live in the Pacific Northwest. We get rain. We've known for that. And I don't think a lot of people know. I think New York gets more rain actually than Seattle. We just have longer, drizzlier days on the calendar. So this year we had record rainfall. What problems do gardeners see when something like that happens? I mean, it was cooler too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it's one of those, when that plant never dries out and it sits in a bog, a lot of plants aren't used to, sitting in those kind of conditions. And it's, I have some at home that, I have some rhododendrons that I planted this winter that they look wilty. And they've just been sitting in wet for so many months, they've just not been able to dry out. New roots kind of rot because they don't have the drainage. And I think that's kind of the key for a lot of things. Whenever we're planting anything in our yard, we need to make sure we know what that soil is, what our drainage is, and make sure our soil is amended. Because it's going to help, come those wet, rainy seasons when have standing water. If that water is not draining out and running anywhere, you're going to have issues. And it also helps with the health of the plant in the summertime when it does dry out, because those roots are established. The soil is going to be able to hold some water without, totally running away. So, make sure our soils are amended, have the drainage, have the good nutrients in there. It's going to, the overall health of any plant, either for too wet or too hot, is going to help that plant.
Right, and then this is a good time of year. We had record rain for the Oregon area. We had, 4 inches over average for April. It was just horrible. I think 2 days of sunshine.
Yeah.
So look at your garden and see, do you have a lot of wet spots? Because maybe that's chronic there. So maybe you can change it now. So going forward, you're not going to have problems. So maybe you have to replant things, or maybe you have to add in a French drain or something and do some kind of mechanical work there so that you're not going to have problems down the road.
Well, we talked too about mold and mildew. So those conditions happen with the moisture?
Oh yeah, so everything was leafed out. Plants were on schedule, and then all of a sudden there's no sun, and you get cold temperatures. We were like 10 degrees colder than normal, and then it's even colder at night. So
Yeah.
it was pretty terrible.
With the wet and the not drying out, that's where you're going to start getting some of your black spots, your botrytises, your mildews are going to be a lot more prevalent in those areas. And especially when you do get that sun that comes out and then goes right back away again. Where you have bouncing back and forth between the sun and a lot of rain, you're going to get a lot more issues.
Yeah.
And I'm for people at home, botrytis is a gray mold, and if you have strawberries, a lot of times you will see that in the spring because they're so low to the ground, they don't dry out. And if you have any kind of wet weather, wet rain, warm weather, it's going to create those perfect conditions for that botrytis.
And too, we can talk about containers. A lot of people have containers.
Yeah.
And so if you can take your saucers away, especially for winter and spring, because then it's not going to hold water. And if you notice that there's, your containers are floating, tip them out. You have to make sure that those plants are just sitting there. I mean, they are not able to help with the drainage sometimes. So you just need to tip them out and make sure that they're as healthy as possible in those rainy days.
And that's showing a sign too that your drain holes
Your
are plugged.
drain holes are plugged,
You gotta replant that pot. So now we're getting into summer, and we talked about the heat dome last year, the 116 degrees. So when a plant is stressed like that, what can a gardener do? You mentioned a little bit about mulches. So what does a mulch do for a plant in extreme heat?
Right. So typically with like a mulch would be either like a bark dust, a good layer of like a garden soil, or a mulch that you'll either buy them in the bags or in bulk. What that mulch will do is basically kind of provides an insulator layer over the top. It helps with break down, eventually add nutrients back into the soil, helps with weed suppression, but it also provides that barrier from the heat that's baking down on there. It gives a little bit of protection so those roots of that plant are not drying out as quickly. So it does help retain the moisture in the ground.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because especially here, we don't have the best soil. We have heavy clay, so it bakes in the sun, and then it gets really hard. So when you put that mulch on there, it just adds a cooling event to that area.
Yeah, and sometimes people put the mulch on too far. I mean, it goes up to the base of the plant, which is not good.
No, not
Right.
at all.
Yeah, you don't want to bury the plant and
Right, the crown.
The crown, but but it also brings up a good point of when you are planting. When we typically have like a heavy clay soil, where we're digging our hole. A lot of us get in the habit of just digging at the size of the plant, root ball that plant is coming in. And when you have a heavy clay soil, you dig it there. Basically just acts like a basin where it's going to hold that water, and that plant is going to either rot in the wintertime, or those roots are not going to be able to get out and get established through that clay barrier, where then in the summertime you don't have the roots established, where it's going to dry out a lot quicker. So it's it's imperative that when you go to plant that plant, you are digging that hole much, you're going deeper and then backfilling it up with a good plant mulch mixed in with what the native soils that have come out. Dig it wider, and fill your hole with water before you put your plant in there, and see how it does. If it drains right out, you're great. If it sits there and holds it like a big bucket, you might need to make sure you do it a little bit.
And
more
they call it mudding in when
Mudding
you fill up the hole with water.
Yeah, Jim McNeelan taught us that.
Yeah, our local OSU extension expert. So we were talking too about the size of the hole, and I always heard the saying, you put $40 into the hole for a $10 plant, because you want to have twice as wide as the pot that it's in. You want to have it where the crown isn't buried, and the crown is where the roots end and the stems actually begin. And you want to give your plant the best chance for success by doing that. So we were talking about adding a fertilizer. So a lot of people will add a fertilizer. They try to get their plants off to a good start. Planting during a drought is not a good time to do that, is it?
Well, sometimes it's time when you have time to do it. So if you're going to be planting in the middle of summer, you need to make sure you're adding compost into that hole.
Right.
You need to be mudding it in. You need to be watering it. You can't go on vacation within 2 weeks of planting a new plant, or even a month or so. People plant and it's like, well, I'm out of here for a month, and it's like neighbors aren't going to watch. The dog sitter isn't going to watch this plant, and so you have to make sure that plant is getting extra care. in the middle of summer. I think you can plant anytime that your ground isn't frozen, but it's extra care, it's extra work if it's in the middle of summer.
I'm guilty of and notorious for constantly moving plants around in my yard, and I do it pretty much year round. I moved some last week, and I got tired of this over here, so I dug it up and moved it over there and did this around, and then we had some heat. I did get a little bit of wilt, but I'm also pretty on top of my yard, and I'm out in it all day, or every day, not all day, but every day, paying attention to my watering. But I am prepping my hole. I'm putting in good soil with it. I have a little starter fertilizer that's going into the hole, and I'm keeping it moist. And if I do get some wilt, I'll do some little selective pruning. But I think if you are diligent, just because it's summertime doesn't mean that you can't plant.
Right.
Yeah, and then the rule is too, whenever you get a new plant in the ground, that first year, especially drought-tolerant plants, people think, well, it's drought-tolerant.
Right.
That first year, it's very important to keep it well-watered, allow it to establish, and then that drought tolerance becomes an attribute further down the road. So.
Right.
And I think we've learned too is slow deep watering instead of just sitting there with the hose and doing 5 seconds. Have a slow, let it soak in, even like walk away and then go back again.
Right.
And then that whole root ball is getting wet. And even take your shovel or a trowel and see how far down that water's
Because if
going.
you figure out your typical 1 gallon, 5 gallon shrub or tree, you have almost a foot deep, if not more, that water needs to penetrate down. So if you're just watering a little bit off the top of the hose, it's only going to go down, an inch, maybe. That slow trickle is definitely important to make sure that is getting all the way down. And then it's not drying out as quick either.
Yes, definitely.
Because I think, people get in the summer months, they get in the habit of, they water a lot, a short amount of time, often. So it's establishing just a short amount of thing, and the roots are not going deep, right? Because they need to go to where that water is. So like in your lawn or in your shrubs, if you're only watering that top inch, you're not getting the watering down. It's not promoting that deep root growth that you need to be able to withstand the heats later.
Yeah, definitely. I like to take an adult beverage out there if I'm watering.
Which is what we're
Why do you think I'm in the yard all the time, Judy?
And when you brought up watering, and this brings up a pet peeve, and I even see people in the industry talk about this, about watering your plants in the heat. You're going to burn the leaves. The droplets are going to burn the leaves. And it's not true, is it?
Not true.
No.
It's proven. It's not true that if you put water on a leaf, it's going to burn it. It's not like a magnifying glass.
Well, and some people say, and we've even done this as a demonstration, for a magnifying glass to burn paper, you have to hold it up, and so that the focal point is focused on that piece of paper. And the same is true for a leaf. So you can water during the summer in the heat.
Yes.
It's not always the most efficient use of water because it evaporates almost as quickly. Transoevaporation is
Yes, I
the
think
term.
that's it. Yep.
But that's a pet peeve, and we always
Yeah.
we see nursery owners, we see master gardeners, we see a lot of people that recommend that, and it's not true. It's been proven.
Yeah, and the plants are so happy. I mean, you're cooling it down, you're giving it some more humidity, and so they can really absorb that through their leaves. And it cools the air around it. So you're really kind of creating a little microclimate right there.
Because we did have, this spring, we've talked about how we've been so wet and cool this spring, but we did have just a quick turn where it bumped up into the low 90s after being, in the 60s for, 50s and cold and wet. That quick transition was also very stressful on the plants. And being earlier in the spring, my hydrangeas are always the case. It seems like every spring, the first heat that we get, there's no amount of water that I can put on that plant to keep it from wilting down. It's just that new growth is so tender and so lush, and it's just so delicate that it hasn't really hardened off.
Right.
So it's not, not used to being, it's just a fresh new leaf. So it's hard to keep that. So there are some things. I was going out and putting like a big golf umbrella over the top of my hydrangea when we had the heat, just to kind of keep the sun off. I kept it wet and misted down to keep the temperatures cooler in the leaves so they wouldn't burn, and it did definitely help this year. I did still get a little bit of crispy leaves, but you do have some extremes where you're bouncing back and forth from one extreme to the next. That you can take some measures like putting a shade cloth over it, or an umbrella, or a little canopy over certain plants that might be a little bit more tender. suspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. Or else you can move those containers. I know during that heat dome, I moved all my containers way out of
Right.
the sun against the house in the shade because they were just frying. It was just, it was just so hot.
Well, but the main thing is that we know plants want to live.
Good air.
You want to give them the best conditions to do that. So we hope some of those tips help. After a word from Capital Subaru, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about zonal denial and what that means to you and your plants, and we'll be right back.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
Join Garden Time as we hit the road again. In September of 2022, we'll travel to Holland and Belgium. We'll visit the world-famous Aalsmeer flower auction, Flora World, the University Gardens of Ghent, and the Japanese Gardens of The Hague. We'll also visit the once-a-decade Floriade Expo, the World's Fair of Gardening. Enjoy the sights, sounds, and tastes of Ghent, The Hague, and Amsterdam on this wonderful tour. Go to Garden Time Tours for more information, and we'll see you in Europe. Welcome back to Garden Time. I'm Jeff with Ryan and Judy. We talked about extreme weather and what that means for plants and gardeners, especially here in the Pacific Northwest. But we're now going to talk about zonal denial. So this is where you know what your zone is, and for us it's a zone 7, which is 0 and above generally. So that means that you plant plants that are not hardy or may not be normal for this area. So zonal denial is you're saying, I don't care, I'm going to put tropical plants out. And we do that here. So what is the attitude when you put out a plant that is not made for this area?
So I got a plant, it's called Mandevilla, and it's got these beautiful blood red flowers. They're like trumpet flowers, and it's a vine that I have in a pot on my deck, and it's just gorgeous. But it's like Hardy to San Diego, but it's just gorgeous, and I just feel like I'm on vacation when I look at it. And so it's not that expensive. I could afford it, but I will enjoy it all summer, and then it's going to go away with the frost and at Halloween, and I'm not going to try to save it. I don't have a greenhouse. I don't have somewhere to put it. So I'm just going to enjoy it while I can.
Yeah, and then there's some, I also love to plant, zonal challenge. I do a lot of like the colocation, the big elephant ear, big leafy ones. I'll dabble with some like the bananas, some, also big leafy things. And there's, sometimes, I'll plant them, and like you, Judy, I put a lot of them in pots and containers, or I'll put them in the yard, and knowing that I'm probably not going to see it again after fall and the cold comes. But there are times that I may luck out and it may come back. Mm-hmm. So I'm usually not going to be real in a hurry to rip it out for winter. That I will leave it in the ground and just kind of see what it does. I may, I have some of the big alocasias and colocaceas in my yard. I may try to insulate them and mulch over the top a little bit, try to protect that crown, make sure they're in a good, well-drained area. And if we don't have a real hard winter, I may luck out and have them come back. Or generally, I'll just rip them out and put something new and different in for the next year.
And some people are really, like you guys, you have a greenhouse.
Have a greenhouse, yeah.
And that thing is chock full for winter time.
In the wintertime, yes.
You have beautiful things. How old is your geranium that you put in there every year?
Oh, see, now don't bring this up. I have a lot of garden center owner friends, and they're like, why are you overwintering geraniums? Throw them out. It's like a poinsettia. Throw it out. And then just be done with it and start it fresh the next year. But we've had many, many years with geraniums. We have citrus.
That's kind of
fun. We make a nasty limoncello because our
It's
young.
not nasty, it's really good.
It's really good. And but those there, a lot of people, they as gardeners, we don't want to put stuff in our garden that we think is going to die, and so a lot of gardeners have problems with putting a tropical plant out there and treating it as an annual, because they are kind of expensive. You can spend $40 to $60 on a plant that's only going to last 1 year, and that's how many petunias can you buy with
Right,
that?
right.
So,
Gardeners love challenges, don't we?
yeah.
And it's fun. It's fun when those things
is.
come back. I have a calla that's coming back. It's this gorgeous orange one. It shouldn't be coming back. I mean, it's not that hardy, and it's coming back. I'm really excited.
See, I always look at it, if I can spend $20 and get, a nice 1 gallon plant from a garden center. That's going to last me for 3, 4, 5 months during the spring and summer. Or I can spend $20 for a cut flower bouquet that I'm going to throw away in a week.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
I'm going to get more enjoyment out of, planting some of these things and having them in my yard that I may be able to cut and use them as a cut flower too. But, I'm always thinking of it that way that, I can get so much enjoyment out of it. And if I lose it and it doesn't come back, that's okay.
Right.
But
So,
it's having that attitude going into that plant purchase, knowing that you can get that much enjoyment.
I have a
definitely.
question. I
It's
have a
a-
question for you. If you were to take out your wife or cut flowers, which would she appreciate more?
Oh,
So she definitely does like the cut flowers, and I do that from time to time.
you do. You are a good guy.
But I do. I'll bring home an orchid,
Oh, nice.
right? So I can go spend $20, $30, $40 on an orchid and get 2, 3, 4 months
Yeah.
out of it and blooming in the house and enjoy it. And then when it's done, I'm not one that will typically try to get it to rebloom.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather just throw it away and go buy another one
Right.
and have that. But you can try to get those to
Sure.
rebloom and enjoy those for several months of just looking at green foliage.
Right.
But-
That's a challenge.
So we're talking about zonal denial. And
Right.
so we know that some plants that we're going to try are not going to be hardy here, but we're going to bring them into our gardens. We're going to welcome them as guests for the year.
There you go.
So we know that our zone is changing here in the Pacific Northwest. So what does that mean for gardeners? Because you used to be able to get, different kinds of plants. Now we're getting warmer and warmer, and we're getting warmer and warmer plants available, which aren't going to survive our normal winter. So as gardeners, what do we do with the changing of our zones across the United States?
Because it's opened up a lot wider selection of plants that we can plant now. So I think of hebes as an example here in the Northwest. A hebe is kind of a nice small shrubby. It's a little on the tender side. There's a lot of varieties here in the Northwest that haven't typically lived through the winters, but you can get some that like the variegated foliage or the deep purple foliage, and they have a nice dark purple flower. I really enjoy them in my yard. There are some hardier. In the past we've lost them a lot over the winter time. They're just right on the edge, but lately it seems like we're able to get away with them. And so I've incorporated them back into my garden, and knowing them, hey, this is a bonus. I've gotten 3-4 years out of it. I know they're still on the edge that I could lose it if we have a really hard winter, but it used to be you lose them every
Every year,
winter.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or like
Right.
the phormiums, the New Zealand flax, the big purple bladed grasses, were another one that you'd plant and cross your fingers and not usually get it to come back. But it seems like now we're getting those to come back pretty regularly year after year.
I've seen
Yeah.
some that are huge.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, it's not 5 or
right.
6 feet. Yeah.
So as a retailer, Judy, when somebody comes in, I mean, you're picking plants, you buy indoor plants, you buy perennials in for the nursery. What are you looking at as a buyer to address the whole change in zones? Are you just going pretty much by what's available from the growers?
Oh, always, because what's available. But I think with the, it's almost like you're stretching the people's palate. You're introducing it like the phormiums when they first came on, or the hebes. It's something that they might not have put in. So you're kind of giving them that extra plant. It's like, I can't guarantee that this is going to be, come year after year, but enjoy it while you can.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're always looking at the new breeding stock that's coming in, and it's like, well, they say it's zone 8 to 9, and so maybe we can cheat it a little bit, or maybe you have a little microclimate in your garden,
Right.
and it's going to be okay because it's near the house, or. So yeah, you're always looking to see how you can cheat Mother Nature a little bit, and kind of slide in, and it'll survive even though she's throwing stuff at it.
So Ryan, you're now picking out plants for the nation. Judy picks out plants for the local stores.
Right.
What are you looking at for the different changes of zones and stuff around
Yeah,
the
so
US?
there's a lot, having done a lot of traveling lately, going down into the southeast and seeing things where it's hot and it's humid. We don't have the humidity here in the Pacific Northwest, and so looking at plant material that needs to not only take the heat but the humidity, or then you get up to the the Midwest regions where you have a different growing condition there, and looking down at the southeast where it's just hot and dry. You don't have maybe as cold temperatures in San Diego in the wintertime that you're losing it out. So it's been very interesting to see. There's a lot of things that will survive throughout the United States to some degree, which is the list is not enormous, but there's definitely those plants, and a lot of the annuals as well. And then just might thrive a little bit better in one area than another. But there's also things where we can look at research, like your local extension agency
Definitely.
is always a good source of that, or your local garden centers tend to be pretty on top of what's going to survive best in your region. You're surrounding, just like you do you're around these plants and know your area, and you can say, yes, this is going to survive the winter, or if we're lucky, or this will definitely, it's bulletproof.
Right.
And we talked about that last week. We had the Great Plant Picks list, which comes out of
For
Seattle
us,
for
right.
us, and we had the National Garden Bureau list, which is more of a national list. But since we're talking about extremes, we were talking about drought earlier, and what that means. The heat, the drought-tolerant plants. And we have a couple of sites, and Ryan has one pulled up there. We also, in the Northwest, we have water-efficient plants for the Willamette Valley, which is where we live. And that's part of our the Regional Water Providers Consortium. And I'll have all those websites up above on the screen. Or you can go to our website, gardentime.tv, and I'll have the links to these sites there. But Ryan, go ahead and let's talk about some of the trees and shrubs for drought tolerant. And when we talk about drought tolerant, we're not talking about plants that survive in the desert. These still need water,
Right.
but they can go short periods of time without water, correct?
Right, and that's it's important to kind of think too as you study the area that you live in. So here in the Pacific Northwest, we do get drought, but we're also very wet in the wintertime. So we have many months of wet, soggy soils, where we're only in typically drought situations or real dry for maybe 2-3 months out of the summer. So a drought tolerant plant here in that condition versus the middle of the desert is a little bit different. So and that's where coming in and finding out exactly what your zone and your region is, and doing a little bit of homework. Because even broken down here in Oregon, we're in the Willamette Valley area of just outside of Portland, where it's a very different growing condition here than it is 2-3 hours away on the other side of the Cascades, where it's high desert.
Right, very different. Different.
Right. That's an entirely different gamut of plants there. And what's an hour or two west of us on the coast is even different than what we are here in the valley. So it's making sure that you're studying your region where you are, and finding the plant that will work right in that area.
Right, and I think too lately, the last couple of years here, there's been a big trend to go to native plants.
Yes.
And so you're really having things that are bulletproof for your area.
Right.
And every region has those kind of plants.
Right.
That that you can trust to do well.
Right, and so for us here in the Northwest, there's like the pine, like the ponderosa pine is one that's on the list here. This is put out by the Oregon State University Extension Agency, and so this is one that's very drought tolerant, and like we kind of touched on earlier, just because something says it's drought tolerant doesn't mean that you can just put it in a hole and walk away from it and never water it.
Right.
So
It needs to get established.
It does need to get established. So it usually takes, that first year is going to need, summer watering at least weekly. The next year, you can probably get by every couple weeks to 4 weeks or whatever, and then after the third year or so, should be pretty set.
Yeah.
But it is a gradual to get it up to a drought.
But you
Right.
still want to keep an eye on it, because I think
sure.
you talked to Lyle at Bartlett Tree Experts, who were on our TV show many times. And he was talking about overall watching that tree over the length of time.
Definitely. And during the heat dome, I have a big leaf maple. I mean, this plant is probably, it's 50 feet. It's probably I don't know, 60, 70 years old, I was watering it during then because the poor thing, I just felt so bad for it. You know, it's just like, I'm not hurting it, and it's like made me feel good. And it's like, you know, you just want to kind of help them along because they are not used to that kind of weather.
Right, and a lot of times when a plant starts showing stress, it's sometimes too late to.
Right.
You can throw as much water on it as you want, but it's still going to not respond.
And sometimes you'll get delayed reactions
Yeah.
from a plant. Just it might have made it through that first year
Sure.
Of extreme temperatures, but it was damaged enough from that heat that it didn't recover the following year and come back. And you'll see that from time to time, where you see big established old, like cedar trees or fir trees, conifers, during that heat. Really, they got burned and they held on and did what they could for the rest of the summer. And then about a year later, you started seeing some dying out as a result of that, and not having that water. So it's always good to, even those ones that have 100-year-old trees, in extreme conditions might need some.
You're helping them along.
But you mentioned trees that are and plants that are local, and I see white oak, Oregon white oak, which is, depending on where you're at, it's called something else. We call it the Oregon white oak. It's what's the Latin name?
Quercus garryana.
Yep.
Garryana. So I mean the Gary oak.
Gary oak,
When we went on one of the garden time tours, they kept on referring to the Gary oaks, and we're like, we have no idea what this plant is. It's the Oregon white oak for us.
Right.
So.
We forgot.
Yeah, we also have
Botanical.
something, Oregon grape.
Yeah,
Right.
Oregon
we
grape.
talked to, which is
Sure.
Mahonia aquifolium, but sometimes goes by berberis.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's
depending
a whole nother podcast. Stay tuned.
multiple names for multiple plants and changing names of genus
Right.
and in midstream. But so that was, the Oregon grape is another one, and then
Vine maples. That's another good one.
It's good a native plant in there too. You get in some of the willows.
Yeah,
as well.
definitely.
You think of willows as being able to take the real wet, which they do.
Right.
But then in the summertime when they don't have that wet, they hold on to that and can
They're still
withstand
fine.
that.
Right.
And then there's various shrubs, as you mentioned, Judy, the native plants. I mean, there's we were just talking about the Mahonia, the Oregon grape, but there are other ones too that people can use in their gardens that will be just as effective during drought conditions, during those extreme heat events, because they're normally used to this. And we always say, we know what goes here because we know what grows here. And that's kind of the thing with natives is a native plant for whichever area you're in, those native plants are always going to perform well for you in the
Definitely.
garden.
Yeah, definitely. And the shrubs, like the currants, I mean, they're beautiful. And
Right.
there's the ones that you see out in nature,
Right.
when you go
That's
hiking, and then they have the really pretty ones that you can have in your backyard. So those are
That's
really
the
nice.
ribes.
Ribes.
Sanguineus.
Right. And then,
Right.
I was just thinking one now, I forgot it, but there's a, I don't know, I just lost it.
The Arctostaphylos.
Arctostaphylos, the manzanitas, right?
Is another one that's very drought tolerant. Ceanothus.
Right, and there's even some of the roses, like the native roses,
like
the
the
Nootka
Nootka
rose,
roses.
and those are the smaller flowers.
Right,
But
right.
it's you're still going to get color. You're still going to get pretty flowers.
Right.
You're still going to get good growth, good good things for your pollinators. So they
Right.
do a lot of double
And
duty.
spirea, like the
Spireas,
Douglas
right.
spirea is another one that would
And
be.
there's even
be-
grasses. I mean, there's a lot that'll do well, and you'll still have a palette, and then you'll be saving water. A lot of people want to do that they want to make sure that they're using their water resources well,
Right.
that they're not a tax on the environment, and so they're
But-
really planting to do that.
Which kind of brings up a good point is when you're kind of looking to do a planting in your yard, you want to kind of make sure you're surveying the area of where it is you're planting, the requirements of what it's going to take for a plant to live there. A lot of times we're talking earlier about a hell strip, that little narrow section of dirt between the road and the sidewalk.
We couldn't always say hell strip
the sidewalk
on TV.
It's a hell strip.
It's hard. You can't do
is.
lawn there.
No, and it's
Ridiculous.
right, and you see it often of you drive through some of these neighborhoods where you have to have your lawn there and you have to have grass. Well, it's sometimes not the best place. So
Yeah.
it's trying to picking a plant that's going to survive in that area. So instead of doing like a lawn where it's a very high water requirements, a lot of maintenance of trying to get it to mow, you're using maybe a lot of sprays and chemicals and fertilizers
Sure.
to constantly try to keep it looking nice. There's a lot of options, like some really good drought tolerant, like ground covers, like creeping thymes.
That's a good
are wonderful
one.
that it's stays low to the ground, helps kind of suppress the weeds, very low water requirements. It flowers, it looks nice. You can get into, we talked about some kinnikinics or some of the lower cotoneasters or things like that can do the same thing, make it look nice without having all the weeds, but much more friendly as far as watering and care.
Right, and our friend Bonnie from the Regional Water Consortium, she did that, and she had catmint, nepeta, and it was in full bloom. It was gorgeous. Or lavenders.
Right.
So there's so many different plants, and it doesn't have to just be a shrub.
Yeah.
You can do some flowering
Right.
things there too,
Yeah,
and be really
yarrow is
pretty.
another
Yarrows,
one.
that's
Another one
right.
that does
But you
great in there.
kind of want to remember too, right plant, right place. You don't want to, you want to pair plants that have the roughly same needs. You don't put water plants in with drought tolerant
Drought-tolerant
plants.
ones, right.
So
Exactly.
remember that. And going to your local independent garden centers. Now, I read plant tags. You read plant tags.
Yeah.
Right.
You help write plant tags.
Yeah.
And I know that growers can sometimes be very over the top and optimistic and making those tags. But if you go to your independent garden center and you ask somebody, is this going to handle the drought well, or drought conditions, or is this a plant for wet conditions? A lot of times they'll say, well, the tag says this, but this plant really kind of performs better here.
Right.
And so they have that information. So going and checking with them. This change in weather, this change in zones and the extreme conditions, is it just helpless for the gardener?
Oh, no.
No, not at all.
Not
I
at
think
all.
I think you might have to start thinking maybe a little bit differently as to if that's what you've been planting and maybe you need to start thinking about a little different plant or branching out and finding something that's coming from another region. So things that are typically grown in a hotter region. You'll start seeing those coming into your
sure.
garden centers and experiment with those. I know for myself, it's trying to think outside of the box. I do a lot of containers on my patio every year, and I will mix in doing some of the zonal challenge. So I'll put in some of the colocaceae. I'm also even bringing in houseplants, but it's thinking differently about what you can do. Just don't just think, well, a houseplant has to be in the house. It's gonna
Right,
do.
no, right.
Not necessarily. I can go and plant that houseplant in a container, enjoy it for months outside, and then before it starts to get cold, I can dig it up, put it back in a pot, and bring it back into the house.
Sure.
Right? Or I can just let it die and plant a new one.
Right,
But
right.
it's you have those choices as to what can you do, think differently of what your norm is, and that's kind of what we need to do as our climates are changing, as our weather patterns change, and we see these more severe thing is to kind of think outside the box about what we can do
Right.
in our yards.
And even you could do, and if you're busy, everybody's busy, so maybe you need to put soaker hoses. Maybe you have to put an
Right.
irrigation system in. You can't be out there watering if we're going to get these extreme temperatures. So maybe you need to get more mechanical in your yard to kind of help with it.
Yeah.
Maybe that would help.
I have in my yard, I have drippers in every pot, every hanging basket, every bed has things. I can leave for weeks on end and it all waters itself. But I'm also diligent where I'm out there and I'm checking it.
Yes, you have to.
Also,
definitely.
so it's one of those. So even if you do have
Right.
some of these, systems set up, you still need to make sure because you'll get clogged emitters
Sure.
and clogged this and overwatering. So it does take some adjusting, but just
That
need to be
helps
on
a
top.
lot,
It does
yeah.
help. It takes the pressure off where I can know that I don't need to
be there.
staring at it. And it'll live.
Yeah, it's going to be, I know we're all really concerned about that, about the weather changing and the zones changing, but it's going to bring different plants for us, and so I think that that's kind of a bright spot in it. It's like it's not all doom and gloom. It's but maybe we can still have a beautiful yard even though things are changing.
Yeah, and the key is you've spent this time building this beautiful garden or beautiful pots. Get out and enjoy them because observation is going to tell you a lot more about what your plants are doing. So as we wrap up, some final thoughts about extreme weather, putting extreme plants in extreme places. What are any final thoughts?
I just think get out there and enjoy. We work
Yeah.
so hard in our garden. Do we actually sit in those benches or on that deck?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
we got that limoncello.
But I think as we hear all of these extreme weather events that happen or have happened, it's easy to kind of get scared.
Yeah.
It's about not wanting to do something or not knowing what to do. And I think it's, we need to remember that it's, these happen. Earth has been around for a very long time.
Right.
And it's a very cyclical, and not to be extreme, but be aware and be open to changes, about doing something new, evaluating kind of your yard and the use of what you're doing in your yard and how you're using it, and adapting.
Yes,
And that's
adapt.
what we do as a society. That's what Mother Nature does. We adapt, and we can do the very same thing for our
And
yard.
I think gardeners are adaptable. We're not patient, but we are
That's
adaptable.
right.
Oh, we always talk about, I want to raise the plants that my grandmother had in her garden. Why don't you be the grandparent that passes on new
Right.
plants to your
there you go.
Absolutely.
grandkids? That's it for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching and listening. Please share our links with your friends and family who love to garden, even those that don't like to garden. Of course, we want to thank Capital Subaru again in Salem, Oregon for sponsoring. Check out our website, gardentime.tv, to find out more information about the show, our archive from our 16, 17 years on TV. Plus, you can contact us through there. We'll have all the links for today's podcast
There's a
on
lot
there.
of good ones.
Yeah, send us your questions.
Send us your questions, except for you,
That would be
Rick
good.
Naylor. No more from Rick Naylor.
No more pepperonis.
No pepperonis.
Gonna block
So everybody have a great week, and we'll see you soon, and happy gardening.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for, and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.